Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire, and today we're talking about leave of absence. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was great, and it was great for the reason that the Olympics is on.
Oh.
And I love the Olympics so much. So I don't even know why, because I don't really care about sports. But there's something about like people representing their countries.
Oh, sure.
Like I watch the men's gymnastics, and it's just like the Russian team hasn't won since 1996, and then they won, and all the men are just crying.
Oh, wow.
And it's so weird watching people who like obviously do these things all the time with no issues, and then like the pressure and just all of the camaraderie, and I can't get enough of it.
Oh, I love it.
So, and gymnastics is my favorite.
I was just going to ask your favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gymnastics.
Big time.
Yeah.
But also diving is really good. And
Diving's so fun.
This super adorable diver from England who also like has a knitting Instagram.
Oh,
and he was like,
perfect.
I don't normally talk about my sport on my Instagram, but here's my little pouch I knit from my gold medal. And oh my God, so cute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just all the people's stories and how they got there. And
That's fun.
yeah, but it's weird. And then you like temporarily become an expert in...
Yes.
So when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was really overdue, and the Olympics was on, and so we watched a lot of Olympics. But the day she was born, we were watching like slaloming, or it's like canoes going down. But I just remember being like, "That's not a 4.8, that's a 2 point," like or whatever. You're like, who? Like I don't know anything about this, but you temporarily become an expert.
You're like, no, I've seen that strip. Yeah, totally.
Although my foster sister sent me a tweet that was quite funny. That was, they should have a normal person try and do the thing beforehand.
Just so you can compare. Yeah.
Right. Because my kids were like, is this gymnastics hard? Like, that looks really easy. And I'm like, just have a go on the floor. See if you, they're like, oh, it is hard.
Totally. Because they're just so good.
So good.
They make it look easy.
Yeah.
In all the sports. Yeah.
So they need just an average Joe trying to get up on the bar. They'd be like, wow, it is amazing that he could even get up there, let alone swinging around. So
That's a good idea.
yeah, I love the Olympics. So tell me, how was your week?
My week was good. Ralph and I just got back from our last summer trip, which was backpacking in Michigan with a friend of mine from college. And it was really cool. It was our first time camping more than one night in a row. And it was also our first time seeing the Great Lakes. And we were right along Lake Superior. And it was really cool to see.
Is there lake monsters there? Is that a thing?
You know,
Sorry,
that's a good question. I live near Lake Champlain in Vermont, in New York. And there's Champ, exactly, the lake monster there. I don't know of one in Lake Superior. But I did feel like watching out at the lake. Like if I'm out at the ocean looking out, I'm always looking for whales or seals or sharks or something. But there's none of those in the lake. And
you were about to make me so happy, because I thought you were going to be like, I'm always looking for mermaids, or I was like, what? Like, how did I not know this? But it seems like you guys have done a pretty steep curve from starting camping to backpacking trip. That
Totally.
seems like...
with the pandemic, we were just doing more outdoorsy stuff, and we suddenly got more into it. And now I do feel like we went from not having camping gear to feeling comfortable with our camping gear quite quickly.
And so backpacking trip, that means...
We're carrying the stuff that we're going to camp with, which means it's very small and lighter. You know, you tend towards the smaller and lighter things, which is also fun. Yeah.
My thing is always like, I want an out. But I guess if you're doing it you're like, we're going, like you're 3 days
That's
in.
true. Well, our first camping trip, we were like, we're going to do car camping where it's like right next, we could leave it, and it's only 45 minutes from our house, so we could bail at any moment.
Right.
Yeah. So we definitely felt like we wanted to start that way.
Yeah, at this pace, you're going to be like transversing Antarctica or something very shortly. So, yeah.
That's a great image. So, do you have a quote for us today?
I do, because it's another reason why my week is really good.
Oh.
I think I mentioned that I'm obsessed with this podcast called You're Wrong About.
Okay.
And it's two people, Sarah Marshall and Michael Hobbs. And they kind of revisit things that, and go through them again. And they did one about Princess Diana. It's like a 5-episode series. And I grew up during that time and wasn't super engaged with it. But it blew my mind. It was so good. And so one quote they had, Sarah Marshall said, you can be a hot mess express and still leave the world better than when you found it.
Ooh.
And so I found that so moving.
Yeah.
And the idea that you don't necessarily have to be perfect
Right.
to implement change.
Yes.
And obviously
Yes.
Princess Diana had a lot of things, or Lady Diana had a lot of things going on, but then did really solid, good things.
Right. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I highly recommend that podcast.
That's
Excellent.
really good to know.
So we're doing a controversial, you're doing 2 quotes this week. So what's your quote?
We're changing it up. My quote is Jen Sincero, of course. If you're serious about changing your life, you'll find a way. If you're not, you'll find an excuse. Oh. And I felt like that was appropriate today because you are finding ways of changing your life.
Yes.
Very intentionally. So do you want to announce?
Oh, yes. So the announcement is I am taking a leave of absence and I am going back to Ireland. And so we will, while all of the moving drama is taking place, I will be taking a break from the podcast, but hope to resume again. But it's sort of interesting because today we're back together in person for the first time. And then I guess then we will be back to being on Zoom. We will be in different countries. So, yes.
Yes. So Ruth's taking leave of absence from her professor job, but also importantly, from this podcast. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, we hope to have her back soon. And in the meantime, Ralph and I will continue to produce and release episodes of the Professor Podcast. So everyone should stay tuned for that.
And I will be staying tuned.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
I hope you're our biggest fan, Ruth.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell us about your leave of absence. What, maybe you need some background first, but what's working for you about that?
Well, so yeah, I think the biggest thing that's working for me is having made the decision because I have been in this anguish state for about 6 months about whether to do it and whether not to do it. And was it even possible? And is this thing that could even happen? And, you know, I think for me, kind of folded into all of that then is moving to a different country again for, you know, and I think some of my motivation in this whole thing, as I have documented over the last year, I've been home with 2 small-ish children who, you know, while working full-time, they were doing homeschool and just realizing like that burnout I was talking about, it kind of stuck and it wasn't moving. And then also just, you know, living in a different country during this period of time has been a lot. So like we've had family members who, not COVID, but had illness things coming up and kind of realizing, oh, like we couldn't go if we needed to because, you know, during various times there's been no flights or the quarantine period is so long. And so there's kind of that mixed in with it, but just also wanting more hands on deck with the kids for a period of time is really the primary motivation, I think.
Both of those make tons of sense. So what is even the process?
Right. And so this is the thing. It's just like, do you just not show up or like what happens? So I think the thing for me was before I even started the like official process was to try and give the chair a heads up that they were going to need to find someone for like taking over the teaching. And so then I actually spoke to the union because they're super helpful.
The teachers union.
And that was super helpful just to get an understanding of what could happen. Okay. And so there's various types of leaves of absence. So you can, and this is something I don't know. I don't know if this is limited to tenure line faculty. That's not super clear to me. But like you can take a professional leave of absence. So say if you got an exciting opportunity to go to Antarctica for a year or whatever, you can take a leave for that. Okay. Or you can do it for personal reasons, which is what I think mine would qualify more as. And then, so you can do that. And then I think it's up to, 5 years, but I don't know if that's... Okay. Right now, I'm just like focused on the minutiae of like, how will this happen? So then the next step is to contact human resources. Okay. And ask them how to go about doing it. And for mine, because it's kind of personal / stress / medical, then I needed a doctor to fill out a form. And so that here takes a while to have a doctor's appointment. So that's why I wanted to make sure people knew so then they can start doing whatever they need to do on their end.
Before you didn't have to wait for it to be official, before everybody could start reacting.
And so human resources are super nice and helpful. And like, I always think they're just going to be scary and mean, but they're just like, what do you need? What are we going to do? And so then it's just a matter of filling in a form and submitting it. And I think it has to be approved
Okay.
by people. And so, yeah, I think if it's medical, I'm not sure that it can be denied.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? But maybe more for the professional leave, or maybe they could be like, okay, you could go next semester or whatever it is.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting. That makes sense. How interesting. And then how does it work? Like at some point you said something about sick or vacation leave. Can you use that even?
I think you
to
can
shorten your leave. How does that work?
Yeah, I think that I could use some I don't have very much. And so you can use it up. And then if you have something called catastrophic leave where other faculty members can donate leave to you. And there's that. And then the big concern, I think, for a lot of people, it's kind of for me, but less once we've left the country. But insurance is a huge thing, right? Where like to maintain your insurance. So I think my understanding, or what I've been told here, is that you can, like for family medical leave, you can have 12 weeks of insurance, even if the sick leave doesn't fill that period of time. And so it is a bit scary that like then the second semester you wouldn't have that. But there is something called COBRA where I think you can pay to stay on your insurance.
Okay.
But then we won't be here, so that's not as much of an issue.
So many details to figure out with all this.
So many details.
And so there's so many different things that I could imagine you gaining from this, but are you trying to gain rest or new insights, or what's the primary thing you're looking for?
The biggest, that's a really good question. I'm like, this is the sort of thing I should think about before doing.
I should have warned you I was
my whole life.
that.
No, I think it's perfect. I think, so the thing I've been really struggling with is this a good decision or not? And is this the right decision? And we all, as I've documented live on air, like at the end of the semester, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And then you kind of feel the wheels churning again. And you're like, oh, when I get back, I'm going to do this and that. And I still feel absolutely allergic to going back. Like I just feel, I don't know, like ill about the thought of going back. And I think for me, it was just like, and I'm trying to use my imagination that I'm not going to feel like this forever. And like, I mean, just the kids being home and trying to do their school stuff while teaching full time led to lots of hilarious moments, but also it was just so stressful. And so I think my primary thing is wanting to be a nicer mom and go back to kind of putting their needs like further up the list than they have been, which is, you know what I mean?
Well, that's lovely.
Yeah. So that's a really important aspect. I think, I feel like I need to grow back my nerve endings after the last year. And it's so weird because it almost doesn't even feel like a choice. Like this burnout was so extreme. It's just like two magnet poles repelling each other. Like I can't even make myself do the thing, if you know what I mean.
So it sounds like you were questioning whether it's the right thing to do, but when you say that, it sounds like it was the only thing to do.
Right. Like we got an email, and I think I'm still listed as the instructor of record for the coming classes. And I was just like, oh my God, like I can't even read this email, so it kind of, So I think parenting and the kids, I mean, they have not had an easy year by any stretch. And, so just them, and then having them have more people around.
Totally.
It feels like the exact opposite of last year, where they had only really me. And then a lot of the time I was like, you can't come in here because I'm like teaching. And so just to have that and just warm bodies who were like able to, that's not my standard for who takes care of my children. By the way. I'm like someone who's breathing, but like just more.
No,
I
totally.
think the thing we kept coming to was there's no give in anything. So it was like, if something happened, there's no plan, there's no flexibility in anything. Do you know what I mean? It was just all so pulled to the limits. And so,
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, what's working for me is I'm excited that you're taking action to get your life more the way you want it.
Well, okay, so just to get back to the Olympics, and Simone Biles, right? Like she decided to not participate in the Olympics. And I was like, oh my God, Simone's doing this for me so that she can but it felt like, because it feels like such a weak thing to bail on something. And then, but it's, I think ultimately, I mean, I don't want to say this because I can't see the future, but I really felt like I was in danger of like fully cracking up and not ever doing this again. You know what I mean? So this feels like, okay, maybe this will like allow me to actually pursue this career.
Totally.
more.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we can see from Simone and lots of people that it takes strength to decide to step
Right.
aside from something.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
but I am sorry that I won't see you in the hallways or
I
work on the
know,
podcast
I
or any of
know,
that. So
I know.
I look forward to when you are able to rejoin us from Ireland. Hopefully, that'd be fun.
Yes. My accent's going to get thicker though.
Oh, we'll have
Yeah.
to see if we can still understand you.
It'll be like slowly but surely be like, what? We'd need
You'll
to
have some cool phrases. You're always bringing cool phrases. So
Well,
that'd be
part
good.
of my trouble is though, like I use these weird phrases and then I'm like, oh, well, they're Irish, but they might not actually be. And then but when I
You
go
can just
home, I'll
make
be
something-
like,
oh, yeah,
I'll be like,
you'll be
oh, that's
called-
what they say in Humboldt or like in Northern California.
That's
so
perfect. You can
I
just
always
use-
get away
yeah.
with saying weird stuff. So.
You can make up your own phrases and just So what are you working on?
like just all of the, well, partly, I mean, logistics is
Okay, it
insane.
sounds like there's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's, it's hard things. So like by going for a year, like the kids will definitely lose their spot in their school.
Okay,
and,
sure.
So it's all of these things weighing them up, which in some ways, this sounds ridiculous, but in some ways it's good that it got so bad because otherwise I don't think I could make this decision. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because
yeah.
it's like, there
You
is a lot
needed
of
a big
negatives.
push
Yeah,
to make it
totally.
happen. Yeah.
And so what I'm working on is kind of just doing that and balancing all those things. And then the poor kids are still getting ignored because I'm like, I'm doing this to spend more time with my kids, but then we're packing, so go over there. And so, yeah. But I think guilt is one thing that I'm working on. Like I do feel guilty about inconveniencing things and that for sure. And then every now and again when the gremlins jump up and they're like, what are you doing? This is the worst idea. And so that a little bit. Because it's
Totally.
kind of, you're like, am I just pushing my life off a cliff? Or is this the thing that's actually going to sort of save the thing? So I think, I think guilt, figuring it out. And then I'm trying to, I've never done this before because I'm always kind of uptight and try and plan things down the road. But I keep telling myself like to put my blinkers on. Is blinkers mean the same thing here? Like not
a turn signal?
No, like, horses.
Oh, blinders.
Blinders, that's the one, yeah. Putting the blinders on and just not even looking, like just literally do the very next step.
Okay.
Like
Don't try to do everything at once.
Right.
Just do this thing and then do that thing. Yeah, that's
right.
good.
And the whole point of this is not to have necessarily a solid plan for like 7 months down the road. And
exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like when you get to Ireland and settle in, you're bound to have some new thoughts. And so hopefully some of those will be illuminating about what is the right path forward. And yes, so that I see what you mean. It's very intentional that you don't have the path laid out because you're trying to figure out what you need.
Yeah. So I think that's like a struggle for me because like a lot of my anxiety manifests as like over planning things, and so, but this, I can't even.
Right.
So I'm just kind of like, okay, today's job is where are the girls' passports? Like that's what I'm trying. I'm trying to keep it small so
Do you
that
think it would work to say the plan is not to have a plan?
The plan is
It's
no
very-
plan. I like it. I love that. That's what I'm gonna.
Yeah.
The plan is there is no plan. Yeah, and like there's things I want to do, like a big thing I've talked about on here. Like I would love to get more into physics education research, and that's a big thing I want to do. And there's even people in Ireland who do really cool stuff. So I would love to like chat with them and see what we can figure out. But it's sort of like the way things have been for the last 6 months. I always think of it like I almost can't get from one end of a thought to the other without some interruption. And not always from the kids, like student emails or those things. So I think,
So you need some time being able to practice not getting interrupted and let your mind complete a thought.
Yeah. And then I think, and things would be enormously different if the kids are in school.
Sure, of course.
That would be a lot easier for them. And so they're going to have to learn Irish, which is...
Interesting. Just the accent or a whole language?
The whole language.
Wow.
And so I think it's okay for my youngest, but... one of my friends is a teacher and she had a good suggestion, which was to get them to watch cartoons in Irish.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So they're kind of getting the sound. They're like, we don't know what's going on, but they can. It's about a raccoon disguised as a cat, so like
you can
they
figure
don't have
it out.
to. There's not like a huge concept to figure out. So they're doing that. So that would be good.
That's good.
And, yeah. And it's funny, you know, their lives are so disrupted at the moment. In some ways, it's terrible, more disruption. And in other ways, they're so out of their normal routine, it's sort of not as much of a disruption, if you know what I mean.
They don't even have a normal routine, probably.
And I was telling you that they were like, no, like we can't go, we don't want to leave our friends. And then I was looking at a rental in Ireland and they were like, wait, is there stairs in those houses? They're like, oh, that changes everything. And then suddenly they're like into the stairs. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's, you know, both, because we're sad and happy, you know, like it's all of the feelings all at the same time.
It's hard to move without both those feelings. I think.
And it's been a long time since we were home. And I think there's a lot of, it's kind of weird. So there's like my identity would be like being an immigrant here, but then you're also an emigrant from there. And
sure.
I think there's a lot of immigrants who are financially able to go home quite frequently, and we just haven't been able to do that. And also, oh man, the last time we flew was with the 2-year-old, and that literally broke something in, like, it was so stressful.
Yeah.
So we haven't gone back in so long, and it's just like this weird thing I can't even explain. It's almost like going home to sort of fill back up on stuff again, or
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've always talked about the Irish Times and the views in Ireland and the Irish mythology, and so it seems like it'll be really nice for you to be able to be back with that.
And maybe we'll go back and be like, this isn't what we thought at all. Like,
which would also be useful.
Right, that's because I'm very romantic about Ireland, and then where we live is a city. Like, we're not frolicking around with sheep in the hills or so. I don't know, it's quite different, but yeah.
Well, whatever you learn, I'm sure it'll be helpful.
Right, and I'll figure it all out live on the podcast.
Yeah,
so with my accent getting stronger. So yeah,
I look forward to it.
Yeah, but thank you so much for all of your help and accommodations in figuring it out. And I'm really excited to hear what you guys get up to.
Fantastic. I am too. Yeah, that's what we're working on. Next steps for the podcast. Yeah, Ralph and I are kind of considering what's working and what we're working on with the podcast with this opportunity. And so, yeah, we have some ideas we're excited about, and I'm not sure which we'll release first, but stay tuned.
Ooh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows, or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.